Okay, so last time we spoke about the sugi of gebrachts, and we spoke about, like, I guess, the makar of the minig, the development of the minig, the kahilas that are much more machmor on it, people that are Meikel on it, some of the shilas, some of the individuals, etc. Now, we mentioned, obviously in passing, that it's a, a contentious minig that could often lead to fighting amongst couples, families, etc. And we briefly discussed some of the shilas. What's interesting actually is that I came across a tshuva from Moshe Sternbach, where he handles a couple as follows: the woman was from a Chassidish family, and the husband was from a Litvish family, who was not makbid on gebraks. And when they got married, the husband said he really wants, his mother's recipes. He wants gebraks on Pesach. To which his wife said, "Sure, I'll make you whatever that you want, but I'm not going to eat from the gebraks. I'm not going to actually eat from it, partake in it." And the husband felt like that was something was off about that. It didn't suit him right, and he wanted to force his wife not only to make the gebraks, but to eat the gebraks as well. Not to just make it, but to eat it as well. So they went to the Shaila to Moshe Sternbach. They couldn't agree what to do, and Moshe Sternbach said that he holds misvara. There's no reason why he has to force her to eat gebraks. Why? L'cheret should suffice as long as she's being mekayim her shibudim to him, and she's making him what he wants and what he needs. Why should she herself have to eat? And he says, not just svara, but over the Yadani. He says there was a story in Bnei Brak in the 50s. There was a couple with very similar circumstances, and they went to the Chazon Ish, and the Chazon Ish was machriya for them that that as long. What's interesting is the Chazon Ish said them. He quotes the Chazon Ish said that me'ikr hadin, a woman is kafaf to her husband's benhagim, ad kadei kach, to the point that he could insist that she should eat gebraks as well, and she shouldn't have a minig that's connected his minig. But Lamaisa, the Chazon Ish says he doesn't see why it's important to do that, and if a woman doesn't want to eat gebraks, as long as she's telling truth to her husband and allowing him to have what he needs, she doesn't have to eat gebraks herself. So that's tam interesting psak. Additionally, I came across an interesting shaila, and I don't think we mentioned this last week. I saw a story with the Chabina Rav. It was actually the Kleisenberger Rebbe said over a story about the Chabina Rav. There was an individual, I forgot his name. The name is in the story, who married a great granddaughter of the Chassam Sofer. He married into the Chassam Sofer's family, into one of the non-Hasidish branches of the Chassam Sofer's family, an Oberlander family, where they ate gebraks. He came from a Chassidish family, I think a Tzanza family, where they didn't eat gebraks, and he wanted to know what to do when he joins his Shver's household. Could he be Meikel to eat gebraks in his Shver's household? Now, he went to the Chabina Rav, and he asked the Chabina Rav a shayla. The Chabina Rav had a few clever answers to this question. Number one, he told them is the Chassam Sofer's mishpacha has the din of mizbeach ein baitkin min a mizbeach ulamayla. Meaning, if the Chassam Sofer does it and you're married to an einikel of the Chassam Sofer, you're in that family, ein baitkin min a mizbeach ulamayla, and you could zicher eat gebraks. The second thing that he told them is an interesting thing. He says the Gemara in Eruvin on the Flamadalit, I think, brings a story of a tainus that was tchuya, Tisha B'av that was supposed to fall on Shabbos. So it was hudcha to be till Sunday. So the Gemara says, I forgot who the Manda Amris is. He says, "Ani, when this happened, I didn't fast because ani mi b'nei sanav shel Binyamin. I'm from the family of sanav shel Binyamin, and it's a moyed shalanu, meaning that's the day that my family gave atzei hamaracha to the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore we don't fast on that day. And Mela, I also didn't fast, on that day, the Tisha B'av that was the Chuya. Now, Tosfos Afanart in Eruvin, as a kasha, Tosfos says that this man, the Amar, who's being mentioned, he's a Kohen. He's not Mibnei Sana Shel Binyamin. So how could he say that I'm not fasting? This is Tchuya for me because I'm Mibnei Sana Shel Binyamin. Tosfos explains that maybe it's possibly that it's two different terutzim. In Tosfos, it's not one teretz, maybe it's two different terutzim. But Tosfos says that either Tosfos says he was an Edim by that family, and since he was an Edim by that family, he potentially had to shtel to them and hug him, or maybe he was together with them and he didn't want to be meshana from the tzibur. Now, as a nidin, if Tosfos is saying one teretz, two terutzim, Reb Moshe has a tshuva about this. Actually, a conversation with his son Reb David about this Gemara and this Tosfos, and maybe it's something worth going into. I think we briefly touched it years ago when we spoke about Hadlakas Neiris, Minhagim of Hadlakas Neiris, where there is some sort of whispers in the Paiskim that a woman has like kedima to follow her minhagim in regards to Hadlakas Neiris. We mentioned this Tosfos or Moshe has a tshuva about it, but Yechshia the Chabinish tells this too to say that if you're marrying into a chashav, a family that has minhagim, then even if they're kilukulis and it's not stimming with your minhagim, you're allowed to do them. The Eidim is allowed to do, the Shveres Minhagim. This is just, it exists. These various Minhagim exist. Now, what I really want to talk about today was a particular carve out or exception in the minig of Gebraks, and that's as follows. There is a bakant minig, I think probably by most people who have the minig not the Gebraks, that on Achron Shal Pesach, the last day of Pesach, they're not noyig, the minig of not eating Gebraks goes away. The Shulchan Aruch Harav in his seminal tshuva and Siman Vav that we mentioned last week, where he lays down the anchor, the roots, the foundation of some of the minig of Gebraks, he mentions that on Achron Shal Pesach one need not be machmer. The shulchan, so this is the minig, and ad kach. I think there was some chassidim who would I think the Rebbe, the Riyatz, it's brought down in the Hayom Yom of Chabad, that on Achron Shal Pesach he would be medaktik to eat Gebraks in as many formats and as often as he could. It's like a mitzvah to eat Gebraks in Achron Shal Pesach. I saw even b'shem one of the early rabbis, I think a son of the Marva Shemesh, that on eating matzah he would say l'shem yichud v'chulu harini mekayim minig Yisrael Torah. When he would eat matzah on Achron Shal Pesach, he would say like a l'shem yichud v'mekayim minig Shel Torah. Now, interesting that it took on such a life of its own to be medaktik to eat it on Achron Shal Pesach. Now the problem is, and there's a few ways to ask this, there's a halacha issue with this, that meaning Achron Shal Pesach, it's shver that it should be different than the rest of Yom Tif, because Mechat Heset v'Mishana, it's really still part of Yom Tif. That's Aleph. And Beis, there's another Nakuda, is meaning even Lu Yehei that Achron Shal Pesach is somewhat of a step down, Madrega. Why is there such a idea of this? And maybe you'll find some other parallels that are worth discussing. So I just want to share, there is actually, so the way Moshe Sternbuch asks it in his tshuva, he says Kayedua lanu, that Divrei Chazal and Archaviv and sometimes we're machmer yoser by the Rabbanans than we are by the Reisis. Now, granted, not by Sveikis and whatever, meaning, but Chazal chmiru b'devreim, because there's a certain kalkite and a certain ability for things to get out of hand. So Meikel, he says, Hayitachem this minig to be Meikel and Gebraks on Achron Shal Pesach, and we have to be matzdik and explain what it is that these this minig implies. Now, there is a shtickle makar, the Chumrah Sadeshen, in Simon Kof Pei Zayin. He handles yayin that was cooked up in chametz tikteris, and he says that kach noegin poi al pi merenu of Gershon zal, merenu of Markel zal, shein shoysin menu Pesach rak b'yam teva achron de ein elam d'Rabbanim v'chenin noeg achareim. And this is gebracht in Shulchan Aruch as well. This Chumrah Sadeshen is brought. So there is a Chumrah Sadeshen that's some sort of source that seems to hold like this. The Torah in Siman Taf Samach Zayin, when he's handling a chita that's found in an Isa, he says, "Hu b'yam teva achron shal Pesach." Mutal hashoyse adachar Pesach, and he has some sort of cool in the Beis Yosef and Arichas to discuss this. But there is here and there wisps of this idea that Achron Shal Pesach, we're more Meikel. Lemaisa, the Pri Chadash in our Chaim, it's Mitaf Mem Zayin, Nochas Pesach, he says as follows. He says, "Masha Kosav, Avu b'yam teva achron yesh lahakol boy. Kain Kosav Piskim Arai." That's where it comes from. The Chumrah Sadeshem, Simon Kof Pei Zayin. Ve'einei nachin. He says it's not acceptable. It's not true. Because we say in the Gemara in Brachas, Ravashi ani le'lamim b'lechisha, ke'echad le'mizalzlu b'atayv ha'metiv. Perek memad likin, ahoda amrina on safik de devreim le'boy bruchi, parchina v'yam tav sheni safik devreim le'boy bruchi, mishani hasam ke'echad le'zalzlu b'ay. So he says, oftentimes you see that when there's a chashash, that if we're going to be Meikel about Yom Tov Sheni, it could lead to zilzul, and people are not going to take it seriously. So Chazal Adar, but they're machmer about it. He says, v'hachanami, anu matirin l'shtoise b'yam tov achron yizalzlu b'ay. So Meikel, he sasays, nearly not like the Chumrah Sadeshen, not like this makar that we're bringing down, and a person has to be machmer, maybe even more so on Yom Tov Sheni than on the rest of it. And Taka, the minig of the Goyin, is gebracht to be machmer more on Yom Tov Sheni than even on Yom Tov Rishon. Now, because of this, interestingly, I saw a funny minig. I don't know who this is, but Rav Chaim Yeshua Blumenthal. He was the Rav of Kamenetz. I don't know when or who. I don't know much about him. He was, so I guess you could say triggered by the minig of eating gebraks on Shmini Shal Pesach, so that he would be medaktik to eat gebraks at least sometime during the first 7 days of Pesach, and not to eat any gebraks in Achron Shal Pesach, like haitzim liban a little bit. So meaning there's like an interesting, I say arching of the back or hardening of the positions over here, is that those who are machmer, not to eat gebraks the whole Pesach, seemingly have a grace of cool on Achron Shal Pesach, and others don't see it that way. So now, why is this Achron Shal Pesach? Meaning, what's the what's going on over here. So there's, I guess, the proper opening way to start it is there's a Bnei Yisachar in Derech Pekudecha, where he says it's a cryptic quote. I'll read the whole quote, and we have to see what to make of it. And I think that others, B'signoin Shalahem, are saying the same thing, some in different ways. He says as follows: he says, V'chol davar she'adam oisem mitzad ha'chumrah yoisem mishuras hadin. Anything that a person does mitzad ha'chumrah more than shuras hadin, meharoyish lo lahachzik b'chumrah hazu b'yamachon shal Pesach. It's min haroyi not to be machmer on this chumrah on Achron shal Pesach. And we'll see that this is the way the Bnei Yisachar are saying it. It sounds like more of a generality, like it's not specific to the idea of Gebraks. It's a generality to all Chumras on Pesach, and we'll see there's another example of this, which is, I think, very interesting to highlight. But he says, anything that a person is doing mitzad Chumrah, Yosim Mishuras Hadin, meharoyish lahachzik b'chumrah azu b'yamachron shal Pesach. Given shenaga Chumrah azeh, gam b'yamachron, and kain machzik hadavar l'chametz gomer. If you're being machmer on this Chumrah, even on Achron shal Pesach, it looks like you're considering this thing, or this chametz, to be chametz gomer. And the Eibishter, Hashem, does not want you to say this. Meaning Hashem wants you to be machmer, and like we mentioned in the first year about this, the Zaya, the Arizal, and you know the idea of being machmer on Pesach, but not to suggest that it's mamish chametz gomer. That's already too much. So the Bnei Yisachar seems to be saying that all chumras of Pesach are supposed to take some sort of like suspension on Achron shal Pesach. Now, what's interesting, and I saw Sam very, very cute. I don't know, it's not really a halachic svara, but I saw from Rav Hersh Rimanover brought down that he says the Yom Achron shal Pesach and Yom Shmini Atzeres, they're memutze between Pesach and Chol, and he has an interesting thing. He says the reason why we have these like days, the Yom Achron shal Pesach and Shmini Atzeres, is to be like a bridge, that we shouldn't go straight from Yom Tif into Chol, he says, which would be like a little traumatic. So Meikel says we're Meikel on some of the things towards the end of Yom Tif to try to like step it down towards Chol, which is a big chiddush because whatever. It's obviously that's a big chiddush to say that la halacha that we're looking. It's like a chatzi Yom Tif. I don't think there's a makar for that in the Paiskim. Now, granted, the Chassidim are at least consistent about this, meaning they don't eat in the Sukkah and Shmini Atzeres, and they eat Gebraks on Pesach, so it's a consistency of this type of framework. But it's a davar chadash that he's saying this thing. Now, there's something fascinating that I think is maybe a very interesting take over here, and with this we'll connect to the other minhagim of Pesach, and that's as follows. I saw brought down b'shem the Rapshitzer that and I don't know, this is maybe not what we're going into now, but that Yom Achron shal Pesach, he says, has to do with the schabris of Klal Yisrael, with the achdus of Klal Yisrael. So therefore, in order to bring everyone together and not like put one group above the other group, or one people are being machmer above a group that's being Meikel, on Achron shal Pesach we suspend, those who have these chumras suspend their chumras, so that there should be some sort of more uniform nature to Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael is all amech kulam tzadikim, and by suspending their chumras, there's some sort of like bringing everybody together, some sort of achdus that's engendered by that. Now, and that is rather brought down in many different chassidish svarim, that idea that that Achron shal Pesach is merumiz to achdus Yisrael. In order to enhance the achdus shal Yisrael, we want to do that on Achron shal Pesach, be Meikel on Gebraks. Now, others, and I'll just end with this and we'll move on to the next minig, is I saw Moshe Sternbuch and Shuvas Van Haggis and Chelik Beis and Sim Reish Lamed Hey. When he handles this minig, so he brings the kasha that we mentioned, that we started with. I'll just quote his words because it really encapsulates the question. It says, "Minig pashat lachal shruya b'shmini shel Pesach." The minig is pashat dik braks on Achron shel Pesach. V'af shroi lachal is kol hachumras b'derabanan k'mebi deraisa. Even though normally we tend to hold on to all chumras deraisa, on all chumras derabanan, just like a deraisa. We're not Meikel about that. The ilav hachi yesh b'zilzul derabanan. If not, that will be machmer on derabanan just like deraisa. It'd be a tremendous zilzul to the Rabbanon. The Hagrazal nog lahachmer the Rabbanon yosmi deraisa, and the Goyin was noig to be machmer on the Rabbanon even more than a deraisa in some respects. B'shmini atzeres yashav b'suk af begeshem shlei yargishu eiz zekulu b'derabbanon. So what's going on over here? What's the idea over here to Meikel? And he brings something from the Shatzer Rebbe, and then he enhances on it in his own derech Haggadah. Is that the idea over here is like it's a limud schos on Klal Yisrael, meaning there's large swaths of Klal Yisrael that are not makbid on this minig, not take Gebraks. And if the groups that are very makbid not to Brachs stick to it all the way through Achon Shal Pesach, which means they hold it to be mamash like Iker Hadin and Shuras Hadin, and there are other groups that are mamash being mezalzlan and not being makbid on it. So it's like a kitrug on Klal Yisrael of sorts, or it's a some sort of zilzal. And in order not to have that, to have like a limud chos on Klal Yisrael, the Chassidim are machmer or Meikel, however you want to frame it, to eat gebraks on Achron Shal Pesach. Now it's interesting because as we went through the sugya a little bit, it's a chumrah rechayka, it's a vaitach shash. It's not something that's like a common shash. It's a vaitach shash, and those who are machmer kadosh yemru lehem, but it doesn't really reflect poorly on those who are not. Meaning it's not a like a kalus or a lack of Yerushalayim. It's a chumrah rechayka that some kilos took on and institutionalized and others didn't. But Yech Shia, this is gebracht. He brings this from different sources, and I think it's an interesting take. Now, what I wanted to just connect over here is that there's another minig, a famous chumrah minig on Pesach that again large parts of Klal Yisrael are makbid on, that others aren't, and again it's suspended in Achron Shal Pesach. And that's the minig of not mishing. Now, the minig of not mishing. Maybe someone will correct me, and maybe I'm wrong over here, but I didn't find early sources for not mishing b'chlal. Not mishing seems to be a relatively later minig. I don't know who when the invention of it was, when it started exactly. I would imagine that it has to do with the fracturing of kehilas, and as different kehilas took on unique sets of minhagim and chumras that didn't blend well with others. So there became an idea of not mishing. Certainly, l'chayr b'mei Chazal, they mished because Karban Pesach was eaten b'chavura. Now you could say that it was only done with families, and that's possible. But I'm sure that there are examples of it not being done with families, and it doesn't say anything about not eating with a neighbor or a cousin or a stranger or whatever. So either I think, if I recall, there are gemaras that talk about filling up chaburis with strangers. If you have extra, then you need to fill it up. So and we say halach ma'anya, and we invite guests. So the idea of not mishing on Pesach is certainly b'mei Chazal. It would appear it wasn't the common practice. Not kedekach, even more than that. There's a Yerushalmi, and that is Yerushalmi in Chagiga that darshans that Yerushalayim is called Ke'ir Shechubra Le'yachtav. Why is that? Because it brings Klal Yisrael together with Achila and Shtia. When Klal Yisrael comes and they do Aliyah L'Regel together, it brings them together with Achila and Shtia, and that's what brings people close. There's an interesting Maratzchias in Nida on Daf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph that says as follows. He's talking about the din, and this is a din in the Bavli also, that during Aliyah L'Regel Hakasav Asam Kulam Chaverim, there's a din that certain Dinei Tumah V'Taira that are normally applicable to Namaretz throughout the year are suspended during the Tkufa of Aliyah L'Regel, so that everyone can be in Yerushalayim together. He says, Nichta B'tzidai, B'Yishalmi Babakama, Perak Meruba Garsinon, Ki Ir Shechubra Le'yachtav, Ir Shemechaberes Es Yisrael Zel Lezeh. And he's referencing this Yerushalmi. I guess the Yerushalmi is in more than one place. This Yerushalmi is that Yerushalayim is called a city. Shemechaberes Le'yachtav, Ir Shemechaberes Es Yisrael Zel Lezeh. Connects Klal Yisrael one to the other, because the times that Klal Yisrael as a whole joins together and meets in Yerushalayim are times of Aliyah Regel, and the dinim of Tumah are somewhat suspended. So therefore, it engenders a certain unity and a certain achdus. Says the Maratzchias weiter, B'Yishalmi Chagiga Perek Chem B'Kodesh, Darshu Ki Ir Shechubra Le'yachtav, Sha'akol Nasa Chaverim B'Shas Regel. Everyone becomes a chaver b'shas regel. Kvar Yisrael Rav Yafei Marel Shinal is fine. Nearly, he says, the Shneim Inyan Echadhem. These two things of bringing people together, Mechaberes Es Yisrael, and Nasukulum Chaverim, which we kind of gave this away already. He says nearly the Shneim Inyan Echadhem. The Kvar Kasav Rambam Perek Mem Gimel Amayra Chelik Gimel. He brings a very interesting Rambam from Nevuchim. It says as follows: V'zel L'Shaynai Aval Yamim Tovim, the Tachlis of Yamim Tovim, Heimakulam L'Simcha L'Kibbutz. Sheyesh behem hana shebnei adam tzrichim aleim. V'yesh mehem teyelas ben yirahava shetzrichim shetei bnei adam b'kvutzim hamedini. Meaning the simcha, so to speak, of Yom Tif is that everyone comes together and relies on each other and needs each other. V'oid sham v'zel shayne aval teyelas yom tovim yudua l'mashi yagil l'adam teyelas min hakibutz ahu v'eschadash ater b'espailas ahu. The kibbutz, the large grouping of people together, and the rejuvenation and reacceptance of the Torah under those conditions, those circumstances. V'hisayev b'nei adam v'chaveretem k'tzasam l'k'tzasam ayin sham. V'kvar amru Chazal Sanhedrin Perek Chelek G'daylu l'gima shemekaver v'sesar chaykim u'mashra shchina se'al nevi'ei abal. So and then he tells through the Gemara in Chelek and Daf Gimel and Sanhedrin that says G'daylu l'gima, sharing a meal together is the best way to come close. It's the best way to engender unity and to engender yachdus. So he says, "Hu adin lahepach gadol apirud mashadam minei atzmi lechletz Yisrael chaveroi," and vice versa. Conversely, someone who doesn't eat with his friend or holds himself to be above or doesn't trust or whatever, that engenders a very harsh and distinct kind of animosity amongst different groups. Befrat eis ra when the guy sees she'einu nemen atzloi ala meisters v'al tyrus v'leil chinam Amar Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara in Pesachim, when he was in Amoritz, Kishaya Amoritz, Mihitli Talmud Chacham v'Anashchanu Kechamar. The Gemara in Pesachim, that from Testament Beis, brings down that Rabbi Akiva, when he was in Amoritz, during the Tkufa that he was still in Amoritz, he says, if you give me a Talmud Chacham, I'll bite him like a donkey. And the Gemara, explains, bite him like a donkey because it breaks bone. Meaning, so there's a tremendous animosity. And the Gemara over there explains it, that the reason is, because Hayos Amaratzim are not trusted, they thought that the Chaverim hate them. They thought that Talmid Chacham hate them. So he says, "V'haya ikir hasiba la'aliyas regel mishum l'chabras libas Yisrael zelazeh." The main tachlis of aliyah regel is to bring people together. So now, again, this is not obviously a conclusive source, but you see the way the Matzchi is describing, he's bringing these Yerushalmis and the Rambam and the Gemara and Sanhedrin and etc., is that eating together is a major plank towards achdus. So the idea of not mishing mitzad echad seems to be maybe a negative idea. Yom Tif is about bringing people together. It's about creating some sort of environment that people feel connected, and under those circumstances, when everyone feels connected and part of Klal Yisrael, that enables a certain reconstitution and reacceptance of Kabbalah Satira under these friendly circumstances and etc. And we know that Alila Regel was definitely about bringing many people together, and certainly from the Gemara says Mashmaisin that they had to share, and they were under very tight and constricted circumstances. They had to share with each other, and there was certainly mission going on. So now, who was the first one exactly who ended mission, who said it doesn't happen? I don't know the answer to that question. It's I don't know the answer to that question. But Yech Shia, there are those who try to find some sources, etc. There's a memory. So the Nittig Avril has in a few different places, like some Makaris, he brings something from Rav Lebelzer, who makes a diak that when the Psukim talk about Alila Regel during Sukkos and Shavuos, it talks about like being Sameach together with other people. And when the pasuk talks about Sukkos, about Pesach, it neglects that part. It doesn't say that part. So he says maybe that's a diak that on Pesach they there was no mishing, people didn't eat together. But what I did see is an interesting attempt at a makar. There's a Gemara in Pesachim and the Flamen Amud Aleph. I saw this in the Nittig Avril as well. He brings it down b'shem I think Rabbi de Babad, and he brings as follows. The Gemara in Pesachim the Flamen Amud Aleph says as follows. It's a Gemara that says like this. It says Rava as the Rava Tameid Amar Rava ki avinam be Rav Nachman, when we were in the household of Rav Nachman, ki avinafki shiva yomi de Pesach, when 7 days of Pesach would elapse, would pass. Amrlan puku v'zvinu chamir de bnei cheli, go buy the chametz from the soldiers, from the goyim who are in the vicinity. So, as I said in the Gemara. Now the Gemara's discussion is about buying chametz from a goy, chametz shavel of a Pesach from a goy, and etc. But the kasha is, and the Rashash asks this right away in the Gemara. The Rashash asks that, what do you mean kaveh nafki shiva yemi de Pesach, when 7 days of Pesach are over? Pesach doesn't end after 7 days. It's 8 days of Pesach. There's Achron Shel Chag. You can't go buy chametz on the 7th day of Pesach. To which the Rashash tells to a Taisus and Bab Basra that sometimes this could be Lav Dafka, and the Rashash says that in Muzdach Zayin this means after 8 days of Pesach. Now, what the Nittig Avril brings down, and this is an interesting way of reading the Gemara, he says you have to put the comma differently. He says the Amar Rava ki avina be Rav Nachman, when I would be by Rav Nachman, and then the Gemara explains when is that, ki avinafki shiva yami de Pesach, comma, when 7 days of Pesach would elapse already, meaning i.e. on the 8th day of Pesach when I went to visit him, Amalan, he would give us instructions, and these are instructions for the end of Pesach, which is coming after the 8th day. Amalan puku v'zvinu chamir de bnei chela. Now, says this person, why did Rava only go visit his Rebbe of Nachman after 7 days of Pesach had elapsed? Is because even from a Rebbe mishmanished, he couldn't go to him the first 7 days, but in Achron Shel Pesach, then he was allowed to go. Then he commissioned Achron Shel Pesach, and that's all in this Gemara. Now, it's a creative and interesting reading of the Gemara. Of course, it's not Pashut Pshat of the Gemara, but it's a creative and interesting reading of the Gemara that maybe it tries to serve as a makar of sorts that 7 days of Pesach we don't mish, and when it comes to the 8th day of Pesach, then a person's allowed to mish. And this would be even on the highest level, because this is even a Rebbe. Now, I think there's many Chassidim don't make Tishin on Pesach, these people don't mish. I think I saw that Rabbi Sol David Hoffernes in his Sefer Mayadim brings down that the Satmar Rav would make them not give out coffee in the shul on Pesach, even though coffee is kosher, it's a product and whatever, but mishnisht, even though it belongs to nobody. You're not eating at anybody's house, but today everyone should know mishnish, we don't give coffee in the Beis Medrash. Now, the problem is that oftentimes there's some sort of inconsistency in this minig, because people who are buying things, a product, even if they use minimal products, they're buying things from the outside. How does that, how is that materially different than mishing or not? And there are some inconsistencies in this, etc. And that's discussed in various svarim, and Take and the Nittik Avril and Rav Hafner's Sefer. They strongly exhort everyone that if you're sticking to the old Chassidish minig of not mishing and whatever, then you have to really stick to it all the way and not buy any products and make everything yourself. And we discussed that a little bit in some of the shiurim before this, leading up to this. Now, what I just want to, and I'll end off with this, is there's a interesting Moroccan minig that maybe has to do with all of this, and that's as follows. The Moroccan Olam, there's a minig that a Moitzi Pesach, some do it the night of, some do it I think the next day, maybe some do both. There's a Suda called the Memuna or Memunya. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. That the Moroccans make. It's a big Suda. You could find all the research about it, but there's many different minhagim. Some have fish, some have simanim like Rosh Hashanah, some have meat, some have particular types of recipes and dishes. There's a lot of culture and minig attached to this minig of the Memunya. What's interesting is that nobody really knows where or why this minig started, what the word means, where it started. Now, I saw a shtickle from a Moroccan Rav who collected 20 different reasons that are brought down to give reasons to this minig. Now, usually when there's 20 reasons that are brought down, it means that there's suggestions, and we don't really know the reason. We don't know, meaning when you know the reason for something, so it says there's an old source, a 500-year-old source, says X, Y, and Z, you know the reason. When there's 20 reasons, to me, that generally means that they're suggestions, meaning these are ideas. Now, some of them are interesting, like some say, Lamashal, the Memunya means Miloshin Emuna. It's some sort of, like a peasant, mistaken way of saying the word, but it means Emuna. And the reason why they make the Suda is because Benisan Nigalu, Benisan Asidin Nigalu, it's like Chazal say, and even though Pesach is over and it's winding down towards the end of Nisan, we want to, show that we still have Emunah and we still believe that we're going to be Nigal in Nisan. That's one thing. Others say it's Mishum Mamayna. Mamunya means like Mamayna, it's a school for money. They make the Suda as a school of Hashiras. Others say Mamunah is the name of a shade who needs to be pacified this time of year. There's various different reasons and different minhagim connected to it, and it's something that, the Moroccan Kila adheres to. I've seen it quoted in Ravadia has a tshuva, and Mazuz has a tshuva. Those are not Moroccans, but it exists. It's a minig. Now, an interesting reason that I came across, and I don't know, it's a theory, is that the Sudas Memunya was a way for people that didn't mish all Pesach, that didn't really interact with each other in a group setting, and Gedel Legima Shemekarevis Sabrias, and in order to bring everybody back together and to make everybody friends again and to rekindle the social life that involved eating, that would revolve around eating and communal meals, they would have a Sudas Memunya to reawaken that and bring everyone back together. Now, if that's true, that would mean that the Moroccan minig was not to mish, for a long time. I don't know if that's true. I'm just an interesting add-on to this discussion is that Suda, that minig, and this rationale that's given to explain it. In any case, to be continued. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.